Time to check out our media partners from the voiceofoc.org for an update on what's happening this week in Orange County government and politics.
Here to talk about the issues in the news right now, we welcome the editor-in-chief for Voice of OC, Norberto Santana. Glad to have you back with us, Norberto.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Okay, now, while there's been a great deal of debate recently about recovering $160,000 in rescue costs from two Costa Mesa teens who were lost in that South Orange County wilderness back in April, looks like local officials might have saved taxpayers real bucks thanks to a techie named John Sendrey. What's going on?
Indeed. The debate until now is largely centered on whether the two teens who apparently were experimenting with drugs and got lost in the Trabuco wilderness should pay for the rescue effort that eventually found them. The high cost mainly revolves around the use of several helicopters from agencies like the Sheriff's Department and the Orange County Fire Authority. Yet Sendrey, a 42-year-old programmer from Costa Mesa who joined the search for Kyndall Jack more than 2 days after it began, used a much less expensive method. Free downloadable geo-tracking apps and iPad, which effectively allowed him to track volunteer search efforts and look for patterns in terms of holes. Ultimately, Sendrey believes that he found Jack before anybody else, a contention that the Sheriff's Department says is possible. What we know for sure is that he ultimately led rescuers to her shouts for help. The Costa Mesa City Council recognized Sendrey for doing what citizens do best in our country, get involved. And his innovative volunteerism, Mayor Jim Righeimer said, not only saved a life, but set an example of what civilians can do. Let's hear him here.
Can John Sendrey please come up to the podium, John? With Kyndall Jack still missing, John headed out by himself the next morning in the dark to find the missing Costa Mason. At 8:15, he heard Kyndall, who was lapsing in and out of consciousness, but couldn't see her. After 3 tense hours, he was able to locate Kyndall, and she was rescued by helicopter. The bottom line is, John Sendrey decided to get involved. He had a plan. He executed it perfectly using technology. In the process, he most likely saved the life of Kyndall Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Sendrey and other rescue volunteers are working to establish a civilian rescue network that can effectively help authorities during these types of situations. We'll keep you updated on how those efforts mature.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I love that. All right, now speaking of tax dollars, let's turn back the efforts of Orange County supervisors.